A devoted father and high school teacher struggles with typical suburban anxieties while raising two teenage daughters in their Chicago apartment building. When a charming foreign graduate student moves in next door, Mike's protective instincts clash with his family's openness to their cultured new neighbor. As his worst fears become reality, Mike must race against time to save his daughter from a nightmare that will test everything he believes about trust, family, and the darkness hiding in plain sight. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel, it's free and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The sound of my daughter's laughter drifted through the thin apartment walls at 2:47 a.m. I sat up in bed, my wife still asleep beside me, and listened. Sara was supposed to be in her room, had been asleep when I checked on her at midnight. But there it was again. That distinctive giggle that had filled our Chicago home with joy for 16 years. Coming from Amir's apartment next door. I pressed my ear against the cold wall, my breath forming small clouds in our unheated bedroom. The temperature had dropped, but not enough to explain the ice forming in my veins as I heard my daughter's voice, muffled but unmistakable. "Please, I want to go home now." 3 months earlier, I had been excited about our new neighbor. The previous tenant, Mrs. Rodriguez, had lived next door for 8 years. She baked cookies for the girls and watched our mail when we traveled. When she moved to Florida to be closer to her grandchildren, I figured we'd get another retiree, or maybe a young professional like ourselves. Instead, we got Amir. He appeared on a Tuesday morning in early September, directing two movers in broken English as they hauled boxes up 3 flights of stairs. I was leaving for work when I first saw him. Tall, maybe 30, with dark hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a crisp white shirt despite the labor, and when he noticed me watching, he smiled and raised his hand in greeting. "Hello, neighbor," he called out, his accent thick but his pronunciation careful. "I am Amir Hassan. I study at University of Chicago." I walked over and extended my hand. "Mike Thompson. Welcome to the building." His grip was firm, his palm soft like someone who worked with books rather than tools. "Thank you very much. I hope I will not disturb you during my studies. Sometimes I keep late hours." "No problem. It's usually quiet around here." Sara chose that moment to bound down the stairs, her backpack bouncing against her hip as she rushed to catch her bus. She was 16 then, all legs and curiosity, with my wife's blonde hair and my stubborn chin. "Dad, you're gonna make me late!" she called, then noticed Amir and stopped short. "Sara, this is our new neighbor, Amir. He's a graduate student." She shifted her weight from foot to foot, suddenly self-conscious. "Cool, I'm Sara." "Very nice to meet you, Sara," Amir said, and something in the way he looked at her made me uncomfortable, though I couldn't pinpoint why. "What do you study in school?" Just regular stuff. History, English, boring math." She glanced at me. "Dad, seriously, I'm gonna miss the bus." "Go," I said, ruffling her hair as she passed. "Have a good day." I watched her jog toward the corner where the school bus waited, then turned back to Amir. He was still watching her too. "She seems like a very bright girl," he said. "She is. Well, I should get going too. Work calls." "Of course. Perhaps we speak more soon." That evening, I mentioned our new neighbor to my wife, Jennifer. She was in the kitchen, attempting to help our younger daughter, Emma, with algebra homework, while simultaneously preparing dinner, a juggling act she'd perfected over the years. "Graduate student, huh?" She looked up from Emma's textbook. "What's he studying?" "Didn't ask. He seems nice enough, though there's something..." "Something what?" I shrugged, unable to articulate the unease I'd felt. "Nothing, really. Just taking time to adjust, I guess." Emma, 12 and practical, didn't look up from her math. "Is he cute?" "Emma?" Jennifer laughed. "That's not an appropriate question." "What?" "Sarah's gonna want to know." "She likes older guys. She likes boys her own age just fine," I said, perhaps too quickly. Over the next few weeks, Amir settled into the building routine. He was polite to everyone, kept his music low, and often held the door for the elderly Mrs. Chen from the first floor. He attended classes during the day and spent evenings in his apartment, occasionally talking on the phone in what I assumed was Arabic or Urdu. Sometimes I'd see him in the grocery store, carefully studying product labels and ingredient lists. Once we ended up in the checkout line together. "Still adjusting to American food?" I asked, noticing his cart full of fresh vegetables and unfamiliar spices. He smiled. "Yes, very different from home, but I enjoy cooking. Perhaps sometime I can prepare something for your family? My mother taught me many traditional dishes." That's very kind of you. It would be my pleasure. I notice your daughter's coming home from school each day. Sara particularly seems interested in learning about different cultures. We spoke briefly about Pakistan last week. I felt that uncomfortable twinge again. Oh, did you? Yes, when I was returning from the mosque. She had many questions about my homeland. Very intelligent girl. The conversation ended when I reached the cashier, but it stayed with me. When had Sara been talking to Amir, and why hadn't she mentioned it? That night at dinner, I brought it up casually. Ran into Amir at the store today. He mentioned you two had a chat about Pakistan. Sara speared a piece of broccoli. Yeah, so? Just wondering when that happened? Last week sometime. He was coming back from that mosque on Halsted Street. We were both at the mailboxes. She shrugged. It was just small talk, Dad. Don't be weird about it. I'm not being weird. You're doing that thing where you interrogate me like I committed a crime. Jennifer intervened. Your father's just being protective. It's normal to want to know who you're talking to. He lives right next door. It's not like he's some stranger I met online. Emma smirked. Did you ask if he's single? Shut up, Em. Girls, Jennifer warned. I let the subject drop, but something nagged at me. Maybe it was simple paternal paranoia, or maybe it was the way Amir had said very intelligent girl. Not like a casual observation, but like an assessment. Halloween came and went. Sara dressed as a vampire, Emma as a scientist. They went trick-or-treating with friends while Jennifer handed out candy and I graded papers in my home office. I taught high school English at a school across town, and October meant essay season. Around 9 p.m., I heard voices in the hallway. Sara was back early. Thanks for walking me up, she said. The party was kind of lame anyway. A male voice responded, Amir's. I am glad I was returning at the same time. This neighborhood is safe, but it is good to be careful. Yeah, my dad's always paranoid about that stuff. Your father sounds like a wise man. Family safety is important. I found myself at the door listening. Want to come in for some candy? My mom always buys way too much. That is very kind, but I should not. Perhaps another time. Okay, thanks again. I heard footsteps, then Sara's key in the lock. When she came in, I was back at my desk, trying to look like I hadn't been eavesdropping. How was the party? I called. Boring. Hannah's older brother and his friends just played video games the whole time. She appeared in my doorway, still in costume but with her fake fangs out. Amir was coming back from the library and walked me up. That was nice of him. It was, you don't like him. It wasn't a question. I set down my pen and looked at her. What makes you say that? The way you get all tense whenever his name comes up. What's wrong with him? Nothing's wrong with him. Just what? I struggled to find words that wouldn't sound racist or paranoid. I just think we should be cautious about forming too close relationships with neighbors. It can get complicated. Sara rolled her eyes. God, Dad, he's just being friendly. Not everyone is a serial killer. She left for her room, and I stared at my computer screen without seeing it. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being paranoid. But that night, as I lay in bed listening to the building settle around us, I found myself paying attention to the sounds from next door. It was then I first heard the chanting. Low, rhythmic, in a language I didn't recognize. It went on for about an hour, starting around midnight. When I mentioned it to Jennifer in the morning, she said she'd slept right through it. Probably just prayers, she said, pouring coffee. Muslims pray several times a day, don't they? I think so. See? Nothing weird about it. But it didn't sound like prayer to me. It sounded like something else entirely. As November progressed, Sara began spending more time talking to Amir. She'd linger by the mailboxes when she heard him coming up the stairs. She started asking questions about Islam, about Pakistan, about his studies. What's he getting his PhD in? I asked one evening. Sara was setting the table for dinner. Psychology, I think. Or maybe sociology. Something with people. Did he tell you that? Yeah, when I asked what he wanted to do after school. He said he wants to help young people find their true path in life. She paused, holding a handful of forks. That's cool, right? Like being a guidance counselor, but for bigger stuff. I felt that familiar chill. What kind of bigger stuff? I don't know. Spiritual stuff, I guess. He said a lot of young people in America are lost because they don't have strong cultural traditions to guide them. Jennifer looked up from the stove. That's an interesting perspective. He's really smart, Sara continued. He knows like 5 languages and has traveled all over the Middle East. He's been to places I can't even pronounce. That night, after the girls were asleep, I pulled Jennifer aside. I want to set some boundaries with Sara about the neighbor. What kind of boundaries? No more long conversations. No going into his apartment. Just keeping things more surface level. Jennifer studied my face. Mike, what aren't you telling me? Has he done something inappropriate? No, nothing like that. I just have a feeling. A feeling. Call it intuition. Something's not right about him. She sighed. Honey, I understand being protective, but we can't isolate Sara from the world just because you have a bad feeling about someone. She's 16. She needs to learn how to navigate social situations. This isn't about navigating social situations. This is about a grown man showing too much interest in our teenage daughter. Has he shown inappropriate interest? I hesitated. When I really thought about it, what had Amir actually done wrong? Been polite? Made conversation? Walked Sara safely to our door? Mike? No, I admitted. Not inappropriate exactly. Just intense. Then let's watch and see. But let's not create problems where none exist. I agreed, but that night I made a decision. I started paying closer attention to Amir's schedule, to when he came and went, to when he talked to Sara. It was 3 days later when I saw them together through the window. I was grading papers in the living room when movement in the courtyard caught my eye. Sara was sitting on one of the benches near the building entrance, and Amir was beside her. They were deep in conversation, their heads close together. As I watched, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small book. He handed it to Sara, and she accepted it eagerly, turning it over in her hands. They talked for a few more minutes before Sara stood up, tucking the book into her backpack. Amir remained seated, watching as she walked toward the building entrance. He was still watching when she disappeared inside, and he was still watching when I stepped back from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. Whatever book he'd given her, Sara didn't mention it at dinner that night. And when I checked her backpack the next morning while she was in the shower, I couldn't find it anywhere. Chapter 2. The book bothered me more than I wanted to admit. For 3 days, I found excuses to search places Sara might have hidden it, checking between her mattresses when she was at school, rifling through her desk drawers under the guise of looking for batteries, even examining her winter coats in the closet. Nothing. Either she was hiding it extremely well, or she'd given it back to Amir. Both possibilities disturbed me. Meanwhile, Sara's behavior began to change in subtle ways. She started coming home later from school, claiming she was studying at the library or hanging out with friends. When I called the library to check, they had no record of her visiting that week. Maybe she's going to a different branch, Jennifer suggested when I mentioned it. Or maybe she's actually at a friend's house. Teenagers don't always tell the complete truth about their whereabouts. That's exactly my point. Mike, you're spiraling. Sara's a good kid. She gets good grades, doesn't do drugs, doesn't sneak out at night. If she's being a little evasive about where she goes after school, it's probably because she's doing normal teenage things you'd disapprove of. Like what? Like maybe she has a boyfriend. Maybe she's hanging out somewhere you think is sketchy but is actually harmless. Maybe she's exploring her independence. Jennifer closed her laptop and looked at me directly. What you can't do is become one of those fathers who treats his daughter like a prisoner. I knew she was right, logically, but logic couldn't explain the knot in my stomach every time I heard Amir's door open or close. The chanting had become regular, every night around midnight, lasting anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours. When I finally mentioned it to Sara, she seemed genuinely surprised. I haven't heard anything, she said. My room's on the other side of the apartment. What about when you're coming home late? Haven't you noticed anything unusual? She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Like what? Voices. Chanting. Singing. Dad, it's probably just his prayers. Muslims pray a lot, remember? At midnight. Maybe that's when he has time. He's busy with school during the day. Her defensive tone set me on edge. How do you know so much about his schedule? Because I live here too? Because I've seen him coming and going? She finally looked at me, and there was something new in her expression, a guardedness I'd never seen before. Why are you so suspicious of him? It was a fair question, and one I couldn't answer without sounding paranoid or worse. So I changed tactics. I'm not suspicious. I just want to make sure you're being safe. Safe from what? From getting involved in situations that might be over your head. She stared at me for a long moment. You think he's dangerous because he's Muslim? That's exactly what this is about. You're profiling him. Sara, that's ridiculous. This has nothing to do with his religion or where he's from. Then what's it about? I fumbled for words that wouldn't make me sound like either a bigot or a lunatic. It's about a grown man showing unusual interest in my teenage daughter. What unusual interest? He's friendly. He asks about school. He's never touched me or said anything inappropriate." Her voice rose slightly. "God, Dad, you're acting like he's some kind of predator." "I'm just saying we should be careful." "Careful of what? Having interesting conversations with our neighbor? Learning about other cultures?" She shook her head. "I can't believe you're being this closed-minded." The conversation ended with Sara storming off to her room and slamming the door. Jennifer gave me a look that suggested I'd handled things poorly. "That went well," she said dryly. "She's being naive. She's being 16, and you're being paranoid." Jennifer stood up from the dinner table and began collecting plates. "Look, I'll talk to her, woman to woman. But Mike, you need to dial it back. Your suspicions are starting to affect our family." That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 12:30 a.m., the chanting began again. I lay in bed, straining to hear words in the low, rhythmic sounds filtering through the walls. It didn't sound like any Arabic I'd heard in movies or on the news. It was older somehow, more primal. I slipped out of bed quietly and pressed my ear to the wall. The sound was definitely coming from Amir's apartment, but it seemed to echo strangely, as if there were more than one voice. Impossible! I'd never seen anyone else enter or leave his apartment. The next morning, I decided to do some research. During my lunch break at school, I looked up information about Islamic prayers and chanting. What I found didn't match what I'd been hearing. The timing was wrong, the duration was wrong, and when I found audio samples online, the sound was completely different. I also looked up Amir's university records. As a teacher, I had access to certain databases, and while I couldn't get personal information, I could verify enrollment. He was indeed a graduate student, though his area of study was listed as cultural anthropology, not psychology, as Sara had said. Maybe she'd misunderstood, or maybe he'd deliberately given her different information. On Thursday afternoon, I made a decision that even now I'm not proud of. I left work early and parked across the street from our building, waiting to see when Sara came home and whether she'd meet with Amir. I sat in my car for 2 hours, feeling like a stalker, before I saw her walking down the street with her backpack and a smile I recognized. The excited, secretive smile she used to get on Christmas morning. She didn't go straight into the building. Instead, she circled around to the back entrance, the one that led to the basement storage area. I waited 10 more minutes before following her path. The basement door was unlocked, which struck me as odd since residents were constantly reminded to keep it secured. I descended the concrete steps as quietly as possible, following the sound of voices deeper into the basement. Our storage area was a maze of chain-link cages where each tenant could keep boxes and seasonal items. But the voices weren't coming from the storage area. They were coming from behind it, from a part of the basement I didn't even know existed. I found a narrow passage between 2 storage units that led to what must have been the building's original utility room. The door was slightly ajar and warm light spilled through the gap. The old ways are not lost, Sister Sara. They live in the hearts of those who seek truth. Amir's voice, but different somehow. More formal, more ceremonial? But how do I know I'm ready? Sara's voice smaller than usual. Readiness is not about age. It is about willingness to let go of false teachings. Your parents mean well, but they have been poisoned by Western materialism. They cannot guide you to your true purpose. Sometimes I feel like they don't understand me at all. They do not understand because they have forgotten how to listen to the ancient voices. But you, Sister Sara, you have the gift. I saw it the first day we met. I crept closer to the door, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it. What kind of gift? The gift of spiritual sight. Most people live their entire lives blind to the sacred. But you see, don't you? You feel the pull of something greater. Yes, Sara whispered, and the reverence in her voice made my blood run cold. Tonight, if you are willing, I will show you the first step on the true path. But you must promise me something. What? You must promise not to speak of this to your parents. They would not understand. They would try to stop you, and in doing so, they would prevent you from fulfilling your destiny. I promise. Good. Meet me in apartment 4B at midnight. Bring nothing but an open heart and the book I gave you. Apartment 4B. That was the empty unit on our floor, the one that had been vacant for months. I backed away from the door as quietly as I could, my mind racing. By the time I reached the basement entrance, I was nearly running. I drove around the neighborhood for an hour, trying to process what I'd heard. When I finally went home, I acted as normally as possible through dinner, helping Emma with her homework and discussing Jennifer's day at the dental office where she worked as a hygienist. Sara seemed perfectly normal too, chatting about a history test and complaining about her chemistry teacher. If I hadn't overheard the conversation in the basement, I never would have suspected anything was wrong. At 11:30 p.m., I positioned myself in our hallway, pretending to check the lock on our front door while actually watching for Sara. At 11:55, I heard the soft click of a door opening. Sara emerged from our apartment in pajamas and a robe, carrying something small in her hand, the book. She walked to the stairwell and climbed to the 4th floor. I followed at a distance, keeping to the shadows. The door to 4B was slightly open, spilling warm, flickering light into the hallway. I could smell something burning, not like a house fire, but something intentional. Incense maybe, mixed with other scents I couldn't identify. Sara knocked softly and disappeared inside. The door closed behind her. I stood in that hallway for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, wrestling with what to do. Should I knock on the door? Call the police! What would I even tell them? Finally, I went back downstairs and called Jennifer from the kitchen phone. Mike? What's wrong? Sara's not in her room, I said quietly. She's upstairs with Amir. What? Are you sure? I saw her go into the empty apartment on 4. He's been grooming her, Jen. I heard them talking today and now... Call the police. And tell them what? That our daughter is having a conversation with our neighbor? Mike? A scream cut through the night. High-pitched, terrified, and unmistakably Sara's voice. It came from directly above us and it didn't stop. Chapter 3. I took the stairs 3 at a time, Jennifer's panicked voice still echoing from the phone I'd dropped in the kitchen. The screaming had stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving only the thundering of my heartbeat and the slap of my bare feet against the concrete steps. The hallway on the 4th floor was dark, except for a thin strip of light under the door to 4B. No sound came from within. The silence was somehow worse than the screaming. I pounded on the door with both fists. Sara! Open this door! Nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. Amir! I know you're in there. Open the goddamn door. Still nothing. I backed up and threw my shoulder against the door. The frame shuddered but held. I tried again, putting all my weight behind it. On the 3rd attempt, something cracked. Behind me, I heard running footsteps. Jennifer appeared in the stairwell, her face pale, clutching the cordless phone. I called 911, she gasped. They're on their way. Help me, I said, preparing for another assault on the door. Together, we slammed against it. This time, the door burst open and we stumbled inside. The apartment was empty. Completely, utterly empty. No furniture, no personal belongings, nothing. Just bare walls and dusty floors lit by a single ceiling bulb. Where are they? Jennifer whispered. I searched every room, every closet, even checked the windows for signs of escape. Nothing. It was as if no one had ever been there. This is impossible, I muttered, running my hands through my hair. I heard her scream. She was here. Jennifer was examining the floor near the windows. Mike, look at this. She pointed to scuff marks on the dusty floor, evidence that heavy objects had been moved recently, and near the window, a small piece of fabric caught on the windowsill. I recognized it immediately. White cotton with tiny blue flowers. Sara's pajama top. The sirens were right outside now. As police officers and firefighters streamed into the building, I found myself trying to explain a situation that sounded insane even to me. My daughter was in this apartment with our neighbor. I heard her scream, but now they're both gone. Detective Morrison, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, took notes while I spoke. You said your neighbor's name is Amir Hassan? Yes. He's a graduate student from Pakistan. And you believe he brought your daughter to this empty apartment? I saw her go in. I heard them talking earlier today about meeting here at midnight. Jennifer appeared beside me. We found this. She handed the detective the piece of fabric. Detective Morrison bagged it carefully. We'll have the building manager meet us here. I want to know everything about this apartment and about your neighbor. An hour later, we had our first real lead. The building manager, a nervous man named Rodriguez, confirmed that apartment 4B had been vacant for 3 months. But he also revealed something that made my blood run cold. The lease is held by a company called Al Noor Properties. They paid 6 months in advance, cash. Said they were planning to renovate, but haven't started yet. Who's the contact person? Detective Morrison asked. Guy named Hassan, Amir Hassan. But that's weird because he's also the tenant in 3B. Never seen someone lease 2 apartments in the same building. My legs nearly gave out. Amir had been planning this for months. The empty apartment, the late-night meetings, the gradual grooming of Sara, it had all been part of a larger scheme. We need to search his apartment immediately, I said. We're working on the warrant, Detective Morrison replied. But Mr. Thompson, I need you to prepare yourself. If this was premeditated, they're likely already long gone. Back in our apartment, while police processed the scene upstairs, I sat with Jennifer and Emma trying to make sense of what had happened. Maybe she ran away, Emma said hopefully. Maybe she wasn't kidnapped at all. She screamed, Emma. And why would she run away? Jennifer was pacing the living room. What if we missed signs? What if this has been going on longer than we thought? I told them about overhearing Sara and Amir in the basement, about the book he'd given her, about all the small interactions I'd witnessed but hadn't fully understood at the time. You knew. Jennifer's voice was sharp. You suspected something and didn't tell me. I thought I was being paranoid. You thought what? That it was better to spy on our daughter than talk to us about your concerns. She was right, and her anger was justified. My attempts to handle the situation alone had failed catastrophically. At 3 a.m., Detective Morrison returned with news. We executed the search warrant on apartment 3B. He's gone, but he left some things behind that I think you should see. She spread photographs across our kitchen table, pictures of Sara, hundreds of them. Photos taken from a distance as she walked to school, close-ups shot through our windows, pictures of her with friends. Some dated back months. This level of surveillance suggests long-term planning, Detective Morrison explained. We also found these. She showed us printouts of airline tickets to Karachi, Pakistan. 2 tickets dated for tonight. One in Amir's name, one for Sara Hassan. He was planning to take her to Pakistan, Jennifer breathed. It gets worse. Detective Morrison laid out more documents. We found a marriage contract written in Urdu and English. It shows Amir Hassan, age 28, marrying Sara Thompson, age 16. Signed by Amir and witnessed by someone named Imam Rashid. I felt the world tilting around me. Marriage contract? Forced marriage is a form of human trafficking. Given your daughter's age and the evidence of grooming, this is clearly non-consensual. Detective Morrison's expression was grim. The good news is that they missed their flight. That means they're still in the country, probably still in the area. What now? Jennifer asked. Now we find them. We've issued an Amber Alert, contacted airport security, bus stations and train depots. We're monitoring his bank accounts and any credit cards he might have. We've also contacted the FBI. This falls under federal jurisdiction as a kidnapping case. The next 72 hours were the longest of my life. We set up a command center in our apartment. Detective Morrison's team worked around the clock, following every lead, checking every possible location. Friends and neighbors organized search parties. Sara's photo was on every news channel and social media platform. Emma barely left her room, crying and blaming herself for not paying more attention to her sister's strange behavior. Jennifer threw herself into coordinating with the police and media, refusing to sleep or eat properly. I found myself walking the neighborhood obsessively, checking every alley, every abandoned building, every place where someone might hide. On the second day, we got our first break. We found them at a motel in Gary, Indiana, Detective Morrison called to inform us. They're both alive. Sara appears to be unharmed physically, but she's been heavily sedated. We're taking her to St. Mary's Hospital. The 40-minute drive to Gary felt like hours. When we finally saw Sara in the hospital bed, pale but breathing steadily, Jennifer collapsed into the chair beside her and wept. The doctors say she's been drugged with a combination of sedatives and what appears to be Rohypnol, a nurse explained. She'll be confused and disoriented for a while as it clears her system, but there's no permanent damage. When Sara finally woke up, she was indeed confused. She remembered going to the empty apartment with Amir, but everything after that was hazy. He gave me something to drink, she said slowly. Said it was a traditional Pakistani tea, something special. After that, she shook her head. I remember being in a car, but I kept falling asleep. And there was an old woman who spoke a different language. Detective Morrison leaned forward. Can you remember anything about this woman? She was nice to me, but scary at the same time. She kept saying I was going to be happy in my new life, that I needed to forget about my old family. Sara's voice broke. She said I was going to be Amir's wife, that it was God's plan. The full scope of the conspiracy became clear during Amir's interrogation. He wasn't working alone. He was part of a network that trafficked young American girls to Pakistan for forced marriages. The old woman Sara remembered was Amir's aunt, who ran a bride preparation service, drugging girls and indoctrinating them while travel documents were arranged. He chose Sara specifically, Detective Morrison explained to us later. Her age, her appearance, her personality, everything fit what his family was looking for in a daughter-in-law. The plan was to take her to Pakistan, marry her in a ceremony that wouldn't be legally recognized here, and keep her there until she accepted her situation. The investigation revealed that Amir had done this before. 2 other families in different states had lost daughters to similar schemes. Those girls were still missing, presumably in Pakistan, where U.S. law enforcement had limited reach. Amir was charged with kidnapping, human trafficking, child endangerment, and a dozen other federal crimes. His aunt was also arrested, along with 3 other members of their network. During the trial, more details emerged about how they operated. They target isolated, curious teenagers, usually from families going through difficulty. They slowly build trust, introduce ideas about exotic cultures and spiritual awakenings, then gradually isolate their victims from their support systems. Sara fit their profile perfectly, the prosecutor explained. Intelligent, curious about other cultures, and going through the normal rebellions of adolescence. They're experts at exploiting those traits. Sara underwent months of therapy to deal with the trauma and the guilt she felt about trusting Amir. She blamed herself for being naive, for falling for his manipulation. "You were a child, Doctor," Patterson, her therapist, repeatedly reminded her. "He was an adult who specifically targeted you because of your youth and curiosity. None of this was your fault." It took over a year for Sara to feel safe again, to sleep through the night without nightmares, to trust her own judgment about people. As for me, I learned a painful lesson about communication and trust. If I had talked to Jennifer and Sara about my concerns instead of trying to handle everything myself, if I had trusted my instincts enough to take action sooner, maybe Sara's ordeal could have been prevented, but maybe not. The prosecution's investigation showed just how sophisticated these predators could be, how easily they could manipulate not just their young victims, but entire families. The important thing was that Sara came home. She was alive, she was safe, and slowly, painfully, our family was healing. Amir Hassan was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. It wasn't enough, it could never be enough, but it was something. And every night, as I checked the locks on our doors and windows, I was grateful for that something. Grateful that we had fought for our daughter and won. Grateful that we had brought her home.
Enjoying our stories? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming content. Now let's get back to our story.
Chapter 4. The first 48 hours after Sara's disappearance blurred together into a nightmare of phone calls, interviews, and desperate searching. Our apartment became the unofficial headquarters for the investigation. Detective Morrison had set up a command center in our dining room, with phones, computers, and a large map of the Chicago area marked with red pins indicating possible sightings and locations to search. Jennifer hadn't slept since that night. She sat by the phone, answering calls from reporters, coordinating with volunteers, and updating Sara's social media accounts with pleas for information. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she jumped every time the phone rang. Emma had returned from her aunt's house but barely spoke. She spent most of her time in Sara's room, sitting on the bed and clutching her sister's favorite stuffed animal, a worn teddy bear named Mister. Buttons that Sara had outgrown years ago but kept on her dresser. "Anything new?" I asked Detective Morrison as she hung up from another call. "We're following up on a possible sighting at a truck stop in Hammond. A clerk thinks he saw a man matching Amir's description with a young blonde girl around 2 a.m. the night Sara disappeared." She marked another pin on the map. "But we've had a lot of false leads." I studied the growing cluster of red pins. Each one represented hope, followed by disappointment. What about his bank accounts? Still no activity. Either he's using cash or he's got accounts we haven't found yet. Detective Morrison rubbed her temples. "We did get some interesting information from the university, though." She pulled out a file folder. Amir Hassan was enrolled as a graduate student in cultural anthropology, but his attendance was sporadic. Several professors noted that he seemed more interested in American teenage social patterns than in his actual coursework. Teenage social patterns? His thesis advisor said he was researching cultural adaptation methods for young Western women in traditional Islamic societies. She thought it was odd, but assumed it was related to his own cultural background. I felt sick. Even his academic work had been part of the plan. "There's more," Detective Morrison continued. "The imam at the mosque Amir claimed to attend says he was never a regular member. He showed up occasionally, always asking questions about Islamic marriage law and the process for converting non-Muslims." Jennifer looked up from her laptop. So this was all premeditated. Every conversation, every moment of kindness, it was all calculated. It appears that way. were building a profile of a sophisticated predator who spent months planning Sara's abduction. Agent Chen from the FBI arrived that afternoon with news that made my stomach drop. "We've identified the network," she announced, spreading photographs across our kitchen table. "Amir Hassan is part of an organized trafficking ring that specializes in procuring young American wives for wealthy families in Pakistan." The photos showed various men, all of Middle Eastern or South Asian appearance, all roughly Amir's age. Some were taken at airports, others at universities or community centers. "They call themselves cultural facilitators," Agent Chen explained. "They position themselves in communities with large populations of teenage girls, usually near schools or universities. They're patient, sometimes spending months or even years building relationships with their targets." "How many girls?" Jennifer asked quietly. "We know of at least 7 cases in the past 3 years. Most families don't report it immediately because the girls appear to leave willingly. By the time parents realize something's wrong, the victims are already overseas." I pointed to one of the photos. "What about the others?" "Have any been found?" Agent Chen's expression was grim. "One girl was recovered in Karachi after her family hired a private investigator. She'd been held for 8 months, forced into a marriage ceremony, and repeatedly told that her family had disowned her. The psychological damage was severe. And the others? Still missing. Pakistani authorities claim they can't locate them, and under their laws, if the girls converted to Islam and married Pakistani citizens, they have limited rights to leave the country." The room fell silent as the full scope of what we were facing became clear. Sara wasn't just missing. She was potentially trapped in a system designed to erase her identity and cut her off from everything she'd ever known. "But we caught them before they left the country," Jennifer said desperately. "That means we can find her." "Yes, and that gives us a significant advantage. They missed their flight, which means they're improvising now. That makes them more vulnerable to mistakes." Over the next few days, volunteers organized search parties while law enforcement followed more technical leads. Sara's photo was everywhere, on billboards, social media, local news broadcasts. The story had captured national attention, partly because it highlighted the reality of human trafficking happening in American communities. Friends from Sara's school set up a vigil in the courtyard of our building. Dozens of teenagers held candles and shared memories of Sara, their young faces serious with the realization that something like this could happen to any of them. Katie, Sara's best friend, gave an interview to the local news. "Sara was so smart and curious about everything," she said, tears streaming down her face. "She loved learning about other cultures, which is why she trusted him. He used her kindness against her. On the 4th day, we got our first real break." Detective Morrison burst into our apartment with an expression of barely contained excitement. "We found them." Jennifer knocked over her coffee cup, standing up so quickly. "Where? A motel in Gary, Indiana?" The manager recognized them from the news and called it in. "SWAT is moving in now." The next hour was agony. We waited by the phone, forbidden from going to the scene, but desperate for news. Finally, Detective Morrison called. "We have them both in custody. Sara is alive and appears physically unharmed. An ambulance is taking her to Methodist Hospital in Gary for evaluation." I don't remember the drive to the hospital. Jennifer sat in the passenger seat holding my hand so tightly her nails left marks, while Emma curled up in the back seat, alternating between crying and praying. When we finally saw Sara, she looked so small in the hospital bed. Her face was pale and drawn, and she had dark circles under her eyes. But she was breathing, she was alive, and when she saw us, she began to cry. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed as Jennifer embraced her. "I'm so sorry I trusted him. I should have listened to you, Dad." "You have nothing to apologize for," I said, fighting back my own tears. "None of this was your fault, Doctor." Patel, the attending physician, briefed us on Sara's condition. She's been sedated with a combination of drugs, rohypnol, ketamine, and what appears to be a benzodiazepine. Her system is clearing them now, but she'll be groggy and confused for another day or 2. "Has she been—" Jennifer couldn't finish the question. "No evidence of sexual assault. However, she has been psychologically conditioned. The people holding her spent considerable time convincing her that her family had abandoned her and that her only option was to accept her new life." As Sara's head cleared over the next few hours, she was able to tell us what had happened. After I got to the apartment, Amir gave me tea. He said it was a special Pakistani blend his mother had sent. I started feeling dizzy almost immediately. She spoke slowly, still fighting the effects of the drugs. I remember being carried to a car and then fragments. A woman who spoke Urdu, being in different places. They kept telling me that you guys didn't want me anymore, that I had been sold to Amir's family. Jennifer gripped Sara's hand. We never stopped looking for you. We never gave up. They had photos, Sara continued, pictures of our family from a distance. The woman said they proved you were glad I was gone because you looked happier. I was so confused and scared that I started to believe them. Agent Chen interviewed Sara the next day, her questions gentle but thorough. The picture that emerged was of a sophisticated brainwashing operation. They had an entire apartment set up like a traditional Pakistani home, Sara explained. The woman, she said I should call her Kala, which means Aunt she taught me basic Urdu phrases and explained what would be expected of me as Amir's wife. Did they perform any kind of marriage ceremony? They were planning to. Kala kept talking about a ceremony they would do before we flew to Pakistan. She said once it was done, I would officially be part of their family and I'd never have to be alone again. The investigation revealed that the ring operated multiple safe houses across the Midwest. The apartment in Gary was just one of several properties they used to hold girls while documents were prepared and travel arrangements were finalized. Amir's interrogation provided additional details about their methods. He showed no remorse, actually seeming proud of what he called his cultural mission. American girls are lost, he told investigators. Their families give them too much freedom, too many choices. They need guidance, structure. Islam provides that. When asked about Sara specifically, his response was chilling. She was perfect. Young enough to be molded, smart enough to appreciate the honor of being chosen, beautiful enough to bring pride to my family. Her family should be grateful. I was offering her a purpose they could never provide. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Miss Rodriguez, assured us that the federal charges would put Amir away for decades. Human trafficking, kidnapping across state lines, conspiracy, child endangerment. We're looking at a minimum of 30 years without parole, she explained. And we're working with international authorities to dismantle the entire network. But even as the legal machinery ground forward, our family had to deal with the deeper trauma. Sara struggled with guilt and shame, convinced that she should have recognized the danger earlier. All the signs were there, she said during one of our family therapy sessions. The way he asked so many personal questions, how he seemed to know things about my schedule, how he always steered conversations toward religion and family traditions. Why didn't I see it, Doctor? Patterson, our family therapist, worked with Sara to understand that she had been targeted by professionals who made their living manipulating young people. These predators spend years perfecting their approach, Dr. Patterson explained. They know exactly what to say to make teenagers feel special, understood, and valued. Sara's intelligence and curiosity weren't weaknesses. They were normal teenage traits that Amir exploited. Emma, meanwhile, was dealing with her own trauma. She had nightmares about strange men trying to take her away, and she became anxious whenever anyone knocked on our door. What if there are others? She asked one night as I was tucking her into bed. What if they come back for me? That won't happen, I assured her. We're being much more careful now, and the police caught all the people who were involved. But privately, I shared her fears. Agent Chen had warned us that trafficking networks often targeted family members of previous victims, either for revenge or because they assumed we would be less vigilant. We moved to a new apartment across town, changed our phone numbers, and enrolled the girls in a different school. For months, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, studying the face of every stranger who seemed to pay too much attention to my daughters. Slowly, gradually, our family began to heal. Sara started sleeping through the night again. Emma made new friends at her new school. Jennifer and I attended counseling to work through our own guilt and trauma. The trial took place 8 months after Sara's rescue. She testified via closed-circuit television, her voice steady as she described her ordeal. When Amir was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison, Sara was finally able to cry tears of relief instead of fear. "It's over," she said as we left the courthouse. "It's really over." But in truth, it would never be completely over. The experience had changed all of us. Sara was more cautious now, less trusting of strangers, more appreciative of her family. Emma was more aware of potential dangers, more protective of her sister. As for Jennifer and me, we learned painful lessons about communication and vigilance. We had regular family meetings now, encouraged the girls to share anything that made them uncomfortable, and never dismissed concerns as paranoia again. 3 years later, Sara graduated high school with honors and a full scholarship to Northwestern University. She chose to study criminal justice with a focus on human trafficking prevention. "I want to help other families avoid what we went through," she explained when announcing her career plans. "I want to catch the predators before they can hurt anyone else. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had acted on my suspicions sooner, if I had trusted my instincts about Amir from the beginning. But I can't change the past. All I can do is be grateful that Sara came home to us and vigilant to ensure that nothing like this ever happens to our family again." The last time I saw Amir was at his sentencing hearing. As they led him away in shackles, he turned back to look at our family sitting in the courtroom gallery. His expression held no remorse, no acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. He still believed he had done nothing wrong. That's what makes predators like him so dangerous. They don't see their victims as human beings with their own rights and dreams. They see them as objects to be acquired and shaped according to their own desires. But Sara is nobody's object. She's a strong, intelligent young woman who survived a terrible ordeal and chose to use that experience to help others. She's a daughter who came home. And every day that's enough. Chapter 5. The rescue at the Gary Motel was just the beginning of a much larger story. As Sara recovered in the hospital, federal agents worked around the clock to unravel the trafficking network that had nearly stolen our daughter forever. What they discovered was far more extensive and organized than anyone had initially imagined. Agent Chen returned to our hospital room the day after Sara's rescue with a thick file and a grim expression. "We need Sara to look at some photographs," she said. "I know this is difficult timing, but we believe Amir's network is preparing to move several other girls. Every hour we delay gives them more time to disappear." Sara, though still pale and shaky from the drugs, agreed immediately. "If it helps other girls, I'll do whatever you need." Agent Chen spread out dozens of photographs, surveillance photos, social media screenshots, and images recovered from the safe house. "We found these in Amir's possession. Some are girls who are still missing. Others might be future targets." Sara studied each photo carefully. When she reached the 5th image, her hand began to tremble. "That's Fatima," she whispered. "She was at the safe house with me." The photo showed a young girl with dark hair and frightened eyes. According to the case file, Fatima Ahmed was a 16-year-old from Detroit who had disappeared 3 months earlier. "Is she? We don't know where she is now. Amir and his associates aren't talking, and we haven't found any other safe houses yet." Agent Chen leaned forward. "Sara, this is very important. Did you hear them mention any other locations? Any names of places they might take girls?" Sara closed her eyes, concentrating. "The woman, Kala, she talked about the preparation house and the departure house. She said the preparation house was where girls learned their new roles, and the departure house was where they stayed right before traveling." "Did she say where these houses were?" "No, but—" Sara frowned, struggling to remember through the drug-induced haze. "She got a phone call once. She spoke in Urdu mostly, but I heard her say something about Rockford and the farm." Agent Chen made quick notes. "That's helpful. We'll check for properties in the Rockford area." Over the next 72 hours, the investigation exploded into a multi-state operation. The FBI raided 3 locations in Illinois and 1 in Wisconsin, recovering evidence that painted a horrifying picture of the network's scope. Detective Morrison briefed us on their findings. "This organization has been operating for at least 5 years. They've trafficked dozens of American girls to Pakistan for forced marriages. The families there pay enormous sums, sometimes over $100,000 per girl." "How did they choose their targets?" Jennifer asked. "They had a very specific criteria. American-born girls between 14 and 17, preferably blonde or light-haired, from middle-class families. They wanted girls who were intelligent and curious, but also somewhat isolated or going through typical teenage rebellions." I felt the familiar knot of guilt in my stomach. Sara had fit their profile perfectly, and I had failed to protect her. "They operated like a business," Detective Morrison continued. "Scouts would identify potential targets, groomers like Amir would spend months building relationships, and facilitators would handle the actual kidnapping and transport." "What about the families in Pakistan? Are they being arrested?" Agent Chen shook her head. "That's where it gets complicated. The marriages are technically legal under Pakistani law once the girls convert to Islam and sign the documents. The families claim the girls came willingly and are happy. Pakistani authorities are limited in what they can do, especially if the girls don't ask for help. but they are being held against their will. We know that, but proving it internationally is extremely difficult. That's why prevention is so critical. 3 days after the raid, agents found Fatima. She was in a compound near Rockford along with 2 other girls. All 3 were in various stages of the preparation process, being taught Urdu, given Islamic religious instruction, and psychologically conditioned to accept their fates. When I saw Fatima on the news, reuniting with her family, I broke down completely. The relief I felt wasn't just for her family, it was the realization of how close we had come to losing Sara forever. Dad? Sara had been watching me from the hospital bed. Are you okay? I keep thinking about what would have happened if we hadn't found you in time, I admitted. If they had gotten you to Pakistan. Sara reached for my hand, but they didn't. I'm here. I'm safe. Other girls weren't so lucky. She was quiet for a moment. Agent Chen told me that one of the girls they found had been missing for 6 months. 6 months of her family not knowing if she was alive or dead. Her voice grew stronger. We can't save the girls who are already gone, but maybe we can prevent it from happening to others. The trials began 6 months later. Amir and 4 of his associates were charged with a litany of federal crimes, including human trafficking, conspiracy, kidnapping, and racketeering. The prosecution's case was airtight, built on physical evidence, financial records, and the testimonies of the girls who had been rescued. Sara insisted on testifying in person rather than via video link. I want him to see that he didn't break me, she explained when we tried to talk her out of it. I want him to know that he failed. The day of her testimony, the courtroom was packed with media, family members of victims, and advocates against human trafficking. Sara wore a blue dress, her favorite color, and spoke in a clear, strong voice. She described how Amir had gradually gained her trust, how he had isolated her from her family, and how the trafficking network had operated. When the defense attorney tried to suggest that Sara had voluntarily engaged with Amir, her response was devastating. I was 16 years old, she said firmly. I was curious about his culture and interested in learning. That doesn't mean I consented to be drugged, kidnapped, and sold to a stranger. A child cannot consent to being trafficked. During cross-examination, Amir's attorney tried a different approach, suggesting that Sara was an unreliable witness due to the drugs in her system. Parts of my memory are fuzzy because of what they gave me, Sara acknowledged, but I remember clearly being told that my family didn't want me anymore. I remember being shown fake evidence that you had agreed to sell me. I remember crying and begging to call home and being told that wasn't possible because I belonged to them now. The attorney pressed harder. But you can't be certain about all the details. I'm certain that I never agreed to marry a stranger. I'm certain that I never agreed to leave my family forever. I'm certain that what happened to me was wrong, regardless of what they tried to make me believe while I was drugged and terrified. The courtroom was silent when she finished. Even Amir, who had shown no emotion throughout the trial, looked away when Sara stared directly at him. The verdicts came after only 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts for all defendants. Amir received 45 years without the possibility of parole. His associates received sentences ranging from 25 to 40 years. But even as justice was served in our case, we learned about the scope of the problem worldwide. Agent Chen estimated that thousands of American girls had been trafficked in similar schemes over the past decade. Your family was lucky, she told us after the sentencing. You acted quickly, you had resources, and law enforcement took your concerns seriously. Many families don't have those advantages. Sara threw herself into advocacy work during her senior year of high school. She spoke at conferences about human trafficking, worked with organizations that helped survivors, and became the face of a campaign to educate teenagers about grooming tactics. People think trafficking only happens to runaways or kids from broken homes, she said during one presentation to a group of suburban parents. But predators specifically target kids from stable families because they're less likely to be suspected. They target kids who are smart and curious because those traits make them easier to manipulate. Her efforts led to the passage of Sara's law in Illinois, which required schools to include trafficking awareness in their health education curricula and established protocols for reporting suspected grooming behavior. Meanwhile, our family continued to heal. Emma, inspired by her sister's courage, started a peer support group at her school for students who had experienced trauma. Jennifer returned to work, but also volunteered with organizations that helped trafficking survivors reintegrate into society. As for me, I took early retirement and dedicated myself to supporting Sara's advocacy work. I also started writing a book about our experience, hoping to help other parents recognize warning signs that I had missed. 2 years after the trial, we received unexpected news. Through international law enforcement cooperation, 3 of the girls who had been trafficked to Pakistan had been located and rescued. They were being repatriated to the United States. One of them was Rebecca Martinez, a girl from California who had been missing for over a year. When her family shared their story with the media, the parallels to our experience were chilling. Rebecca had been approached by a graduate student who expressed interest in her artwork. He had gradually gained her trust, introduced her to his culture, and convinced her to meet him at a location away from her family. Unlike Sara, Rebecca had been successfully transported to Pakistan before her family realized she was missing. "The worst part wasn't the forced marriage or being held against my will," Rebecca said during a press conference. "It was believing that my family had abandoned me. They showed me fake documents, staged photos, even forged emails that made it look like my parents were relieved I was gone. For months, I thought I had no one in the world except my captors." Her story reinforced what Sara had told us about the psychological manipulation tactics used by the trafficking network. They didn't just kidnap girls, they systematically destroyed their sense of identity and connection to their families. "That's why it's so important for families to have open communication," Sara said when interviewed alongside Rebecca. "These predators count on girls feeling isolated or misunderstood at home. When parents and children trust each other, when there are no secrets, it's much harder for traffickers to create that wedge." The international effort to rescue trafficked American girls led to the establishment of a joint task force between the FBI and Pakistani authorities. While progress was slow due to legal and cultural barriers, 12 girls were eventually recovered and returned to their families over the next 3 years. Not all the stories had happy endings, though. Some girls had been missing so long that they struggled to readjust to American life. Others suffered from severe psychological trauma that took years of therapy to address. A few had been convinced so thoroughly that their families had rejected them that they initially refused to return home. These cases reinforced for our family how fortunate we had been. Sara's rescue within days of her kidnapping had prevented the kind of long-term psychological damage that other girls experienced. As Sara prepared to graduate high school and head to Northwestern University, she was invited to speak at the United Nations about human trafficking and forced marriage. Standing before an international audience, she shared not just her own story, but the stories of girls who hadn't been as lucky. "Human trafficking thrives in silence and ignorance," she said. "Every family that shares their story, every survivor who speaks out, every community that educates itself about the warning signs, these actions save lives. They saved mine." When asked what advice she would give to other teenage girls, Sara's answer was powerful. "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And remember that any adult who asks you to keep secrets from your family, who tries to isolate you from your friends, or who makes you feel like you're somehow special or chosen, that person is dangerous. Real mentors, real friends, real opportunities never require you to hide from the people who love you." The final chapter of Amir's story came 4 years after his conviction. He was found dead in his prison cell, apparently killed by fellow inmates who had learned about his crimes against children. While I couldn't bring myself to mourn his death, I felt no satisfaction in it either. His death wouldn't undo the trauma he had caused or bring back the years stolen from his victims. Sara's reaction surprised me. "I feel sorry for him," she said when I told her the news. "Not because he didn't deserve punishment, but because he wasted his entire life on something so destructive. He could have used his intelligence and education to help people instead of hurting them." Her capacity for forgiveness, even towards someone who had tried to destroy her life, showed me how much she had grown from the experience. She had transformed her trauma into purpose, her pain into power to help others. 5 years after her rescue, Sara graduated magna cum laude from Northwestern with a degree in criminal justice and international human rights law. She was accepted into the FBI's training program with the goal of working in their human trafficking division. "I want to be the agent who helps families like ours," she explained when announcing her career plans. "I want to be the one who brings daughters home." Emma, meanwhile, had grown into a confident teenager who volunteered with local organizations that helped trafficking survivors. She often spoke about how her sister's experience had taught her to value her freedom and to never take her family's love for granted. Jennifer and I renewed our marriage vows on the 5th anniversary of Sara's rescue. It might sound strange to celebrate on such a date, but for us, it represented the day our family truly came together. The experience had tested us in ways we never imagined, but it had also shown us the strength of our love for each other. During the ceremony, Sara read a poem she had written. They tried to take me far away, to steal my name, my past, my voice. But love travels farther than their plans, and family always remains our choice. You never stopped believing, never stopped searching for me. You brought me home to myself, you set my spirit free. Now I know what home really means. Not a place, but hearts that care. Not walls that keep the world away, but love that's always there. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had never overheard that conversation in the basement. If I had never followed my suspicions to the empty apartment. The thought still makes me wake up in cold sweats sometimes. But dwelling on what-ifs isn't helpful. What matters is that Sara is home, safe, and using her experience to protect other young women. What matters is that our family survived intact and possibly stronger than before. The last entry in my journal from that time reads simply, Sara came home today, not just to our house, but to herself. The girl who walked through our door is different from the one who was taken. She's stronger, more aware, more determined to make a difference in the world. Whatever Amir intended to take from her, he failed. She is still our Sara, and she always will be. Every year on the anniversary of her rescue, our family has a quiet dinner together. We don't dwell on the trauma, but we acknowledge how close we came to losing each other and how grateful we are for every ordinary day we have together. Sara always makes the same toast, to coming home and to never forgetting that home is wherever your family is. And every year, as I look around the table at my wife and daughters, I'm reminded that sometimes the greatest victories are simply keeping the people you love safe and close to your heart. Sara did come home, and that will always be enough. Chapter 6. 10 years have passed since that terrible night when Sara screamed from the 4th-floor apartment. Today, as I write these final words, Sara is Agent Sara Thompson of the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force. She's been instrumental in rescuing dozens of girls from situations similar to her own, and her work has helped dismantle several international trafficking networks. Just last month, she called me from her office in Washington, D.C., with news that made me cry with relief and pride. "Dad, we found her!" she said, her voice thick with emotion. We found Priya. Priya Sharma had been the first girl Amir had successfully trafficked to Pakistan, 3 years before he set his sights on Sara. For over a decade, her family had fought to bring her home, working with private investigators and international human rights organizations. "She wants to come back?" I asked. "She's been trying to escape for years." The family that bought her, they finally made a mistake. They let her use the internet unsupervised for 5 minutes, and she found a way to contact us. Sara's voice grew stronger. "She'll be home next week." This was Sara's greatest gift. Not just that she had survived, but that she had turned her trauma into a calling that brought other daughters home to their families. Emma, now 25, had followed a different path, but one equally meaningful. She became a social worker specializing in helping trafficking survivors readjust to life after rescue. She often worked with the girls Sara helped bring home, providing the long-term support they needed to heal. "I learned early that there are wolves in the world," Emma told a reporter who was doing a feature on our family. "But I also learned that there are people willing to fight them. I want to be one of the fighters." Jennifer had thrown herself into advocacy work, becoming the spokesperson for the Sara Thompson Foundation, which we established to support trafficking survivors and educate communities about the warning signs of grooming. As for me, I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I made during those terrifying months. Dr. Patterson, our family therapist, helped me understand that my suspicions about Amir, while initially dismissed as paranoia, had ultimately saved Sara's life. "You trusted your instincts when it mattered most," she said during one of our sessions. "That's what brought your daughter home." The book I wrote about our experience, Stolen Daughter, A Father's Fight Against Human Trafficking, became a bestseller and was adapted into a documentary that won several awards. More importantly, it helped thousands of families recognize warning signs and prevent their own tragedies. Sara often travels with me when I speak at conferences or police training sessions. Hearing our story from both perspectives, The father who fought to find his daughter and the survivor who found the strength to come home has a powerful impact on audiences. People need to understand that this isn't a problem that happens to other families, Sara said during a recent presentation to a group of suburban parents. It happens to families exactly like yours. Predators like Amir specifically target middle-class teenagers from stable homes because you're less likely to suspect anything is wrong. She's right. In the decade since Sara's rescue, our foundation has tracked hundreds of cases of grooming and attempted trafficking. The victims come from every economic background, every race, every type of family structure. The only common thread is that they were all young women with their whole lives ahead of them. The most rewarding part of our work has been staying in touch with other families who have gone through similar ordeals. We've created an informal network of survivors and their families who support each other through the long process of healing. Rebecca Martinez, the girl who was rescued from Pakistan 2 years after Sara, became like a third daughter to Jennifer and me. Her own family had been devastated by their experience, and her parents eventually divorced under the strain. We helped her through college and graduate school, and she now works alongside Sara at the FBI. "You gave me hope that families could survive this intact," Rebecca told us at her graduation. "You showed me that love could be stronger than trauma." Not every story has ended so positively. Some families never recover from the experience. Some girls who are rescued struggle with addiction, depression, or an inability to trust anyone. The damage done by trafficking extends far beyond the immediate physical harm. But there have been enough success stories to keep us going. Girls who have rebuilt their lives, families who have grown stronger through adversity, communities that have become more vigilant about protecting their children. Last week, Sara called to tell me about a case that particularly touched her heart. "Remember Lisa Chen?" she asked. "The girl from San Francisco who was taken 5 years ago?" I did remember. Lisa had been groomed by someone using the same tactics Amir had used: pose as a graduate student, express interest in the girl's hobbies, gradually isolate her from her family. We found her in a compound in rural Pakistan. She's been there for 4 years, but Dad, she never stopped fighting. She never gave up hope that someone would come for her. As Sara described Lisa's rescue and reunion with her family, I thought about how different our story could have been. How many nights of wondering if Sara was alive? How many years of fighting international bureaucracy and cultural barriers to bring her home? We were lucky. We acted quickly, we had resources, and most importantly, we never stopped believing that Sara would come home. Now, as I sit in my office surrounded by letters from families we've helped, photos of girls who have been rescued, and awards recognizing our advocacy work, I'm struck by how tragedy can sometimes become a gift. We never asked for this fight. We never wanted to become experts in human trafficking or spokespeople for survivor families. But once it was thrust upon us, we chose to make meaning from our pain. Sara is getting married next month to a man who understands her work and supports her mission. He's a prosecutor who specializes in trafficking cases, and together they're fighting the battle from both sides of the legal system. "I never thought I'd be able to trust anyone enough to get married," Sara confided to me recently. But trauma doesn't have to define your whole life. You can choose to be more than just a victim. Emma is engaged to a fellow social worker, and they're planning to adopt children who have aged out of the foster care system. "Every kid deserves a family who fights for them," she said, echoing the lessons she learned from watching us fight for Sara. "Jennifer and I are planning to retire next year and spend more time with our grandchildren when they arrive. But we'll never fully step away from this work. It's become too much a part of who we are. Sometimes people ask me if I hate Amir for what he tried to do to our family. The honest answer is that I've moved beyond hate. Hate is exhausting, and it gives power to people who don't deserve it. Instead, I choose to focus on the love that brought Sara home, the love that keeps families fighting when everything seems hopeless, the love that transforms victims into survivors and survivors into advocates. Amir thought he could steal our daughter, break our family, and destroy Sara's future. He failed completely. Sara is not the naive 16-year-old who trusted a stranger with her secrets. She's a strong, accomplished woman who uses her experience to protect others. She's not defined by what someone tried to do to her, but by what she chose to do with her life afterward. Our family is not broken by what we endured. We're closer than ever, united by the knowledge that we will always fight for each other. And most importantly, Sara is home. Not just in our house, but in herself, confident, purposeful, and surrounded by people who love her. Every morning when I wake up, I'm grateful for that simple fact. Sara came home. In a world where too many daughters don't, where too many families are left wondering and searching and hoping, our story has a happy ending. Sara Thompson came home, and she brought the strength to help others come home too. That will always be enough.
Wow, what a story!
And there is more coming! Don't forget to subscribe to not miss a new stories.